Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be talking more about the next generation of gaming consoles, and this time we've got a quote from BioWare, and BioWare have stated that there will be a big leap, but it won't be so obvious. And what he is talking about here is the leap from the games, in other words, what you expect from the previous generation to the next generation. So what he's basically said is it comes down to economics, and he's gone on record, and I'll read a small part of the quote. The last technology iteration caught folks by surprise, especially the number of people you needed and the skill set jump that was required to do the work that people expected. In other words, we as consumers expected a massive jump in graphics and game design from, say, the PS2 to PS3. And anyway, he's gone on and said that we can't see a tenfold team increase again, as the budgets would just be ridiculous. You'd have to sell 20 to 30 million copies before you broke even. Now, this is something I touched on another video. I'm not quite sure which one. I think it was a comparison video between the PS4 and Xbox. What I basically said back then, and it remains true now, you can only produce prettiest looking scenes with more work. It's that simple. In other words, as higher polygonal models, as better textures come about, you need to simply put more time into creating those. An example of this already is you've got Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed and other, of course, are massively selling titles. And obviously those games have hundreds of people working on those particular titles. Quite simply put, if the games keep improving that much on the graphics side of things, and in terms of actually getting bigger as well, those teams are going to have to continuously get bigger, or the development cycle is going to take a lot longer. Now, there's one great piece of news from the perspective of PC and console games, and this is another thing I've touched on before, and that is because the PlayStation 4 and Xbox 720 are a lot closer to PCs now, it makes it a lot easier to develop for them. That does cut down the development cycles, and consequently makes it a lot easier for new developers to get into the market, and also cheapens the production costs. Nevertheless, when you're actually designing this stuff, it still takes a certain amount of time. Do you remember when you saw Grand Theft Auto 4, for example? And do you remember kind of dreaming of the ability to go into every single apartment block and every single storefront? Of course, you might have thought it would be so cool if we could, but realistically, there's going to be a hell of a lot of clone stamp tools right there. In other words, pretty much exactly the same walls, exactly the same furniture placement is all going to be the same. And one of the reasons for that is obviously if every unique item in the game, every single unique room, every single unique character, you're going to need to design those, and that all takes time, which is unfortunate, but there you have it. The second problem that we've got to face, other than time and budget, is another very simple one, and that is there's only a certain amount of space on the disc. So, for example, the Blu-rays for both Xbox 720 and the PS4 are 50 gigs, right? Now, current discs are for a dual layer, and they've got roughly 8 gigs. I'm just rounding this up, of course. But 8 gigs, it just isn't really that much when you consider, just what the games now are doing. But when you consider the Blu-ray is going to be 50 gigs, but they've got all those high definition textures to work with, as well as much better sound quality and everything else, and 1080p kind of textures in many cases, you can imagine just how quickly that's going to fill up. In fact, Sony have already stated that some of the games are already approaching 45 gigs. So there's always a possibility that we're already going to, within the first couple of years of the console's life, we're going to see games go over a couple of discs, or maybe have one installed disc and so forth. Because of all of this budget and everything else, we are going to come a time when it's going to become a lot harder. This is another reason, by the way, that a lot of studios now are using, say, the Unreal Engine as a base. Quite simply put, I don't have to code things from the ground up. This means that they've got the physics in there, they've got a certain amount of assets that could or could not be usable in the game, they've got some models in there, they've got base animations in there, depending obviously on what they're really doing. And for example, Unreal Engine is extremely versatile. You can do everything from, say, making an FPS to a third-person shooter, for example, Gears of War, to, say, a racing game and so on. Regardless, what is going to be very cool is obviously with all of this extra power, that is definitely going to be better looking games. They're going to run a lot smoother. It's going to be a fun, I think, is the key word here. So anyway, with all that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the fairly brief video, at least brief for me recently, and I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves, and bye for now.